Good day, everyone, and thank you for joining us for our live webinar on the Invisible Factory. I'm Lisa Wickman, publisher of CanadianManufacturing.com, and will be your moderator for today's event. It is my pleasure to introduce our guest speaker, Jacques Descaries. Jacques is Vice President of Sales and Marketing with Industrios Software Inc. in Oakville, Ontario. Industrios uses technology and business process improvements to help small and medium-sized manufacturing firms optimize their investment in inventory, improve customer satisfaction, increase RONA, and improve profitability. He has more than 20 years experience successfully selling financial and ERP software systems and over 10 years leading sales teams at the senior executive level. In the last few years, Jacques has developed a passion for fostering employee engagement, specifically through the use of technology. I'd now like to welcome Jacques and hand off to him to hear his insightful presentation on ERP and the Invisible Factory. Jacques.
Well, thank you, Lisa, and good day, everyone. Welcome to this Invisible Factory webinar. As Lisa said, my name is Jacques, and I'm quite jazzed at this opportunity to discuss the Invisible Factory with you. But of course, as webinars would have it, there's a couple of housekeeping items that we should handle. First of all, on your GoToWebinar control panel, there's a section called Questions. And what I want to do now is invite you to use this facility to log any questions that you might have throughout the presentation. What we're going to do is there's going to be a Q&A at the end of the webinar, and that Q&A is going to be fueled by the questions that you log, provided, of course, that the questions that you ask are of a general nature. If they are more of a specific nature, then not to worry. We won't table those questions. We'll make sure that we handle those one-on-one after the webinar. The other housekeeping item that I want to bring to your attention, so again, on your GoToWebinar control panel, there's a section called Handouts, and there's a couple of handouts for you to download. You can download those at any point during this session. So there's one that's an Invisible Factory white paper, and the other one is a success story from an Industrios customer that used the managed IT aspect of the Invisible Factory to deploy Industrios on the cloud. So again, use questions, log them at any time, download the handouts at any time as well. Okay. So what is the Invisible Factory? Well, first of all, the Invisible Factory is not for everybody. So Invisible Factory goes well beyond the bare minimum software and training that is viewed generally as standard practice in our industry. Invisible Factory has an infrastructure component. It's got manufacturing business process expertise, software, services, and the behavioral change approach, all combining to help you and your team achieve performance excellence from your operations. All right. So now, what's so great about a factory being invisible? And, logical question, one that we get on a regular basis. After all, a lot of people are praising visibility into data with big data, Internet of Things, business intelligence. So how do we explain the Invisible Factory? Well, to help simplify and help you visualize what the Invisible Factory is, we use the metaphor of a cruise ship. On a cruise ship, you don't want your captain in the bilges, or the galley, or the operations control room. You want your captain on the bridge. Manufacturing firms are quite similar. You don't necessarily want your company founder or executives in the warehouse or the shop floor tracking jobs and parts. The Invisible Factory is a program aimed at getting manufacturing owners and executives off the shop floor and free to focus on their core competencies. For a captain to be on the bridge, two elements need to be present: visibility and trust. Visibility into only high-level information about operations, and trust that the people responsible for operational level details have the skills, knowledge, commitment to ensure successful manufacturing, so that operation level detail can remain out of sight. If you're always on the shop floor, who's steering the ship? You know, here's a true story. We recently had a manufacturing firm owner tell us that he had to change shirts before coming to a software demo in our offices because he was busy putting out fires in the plant before coming over. So there was confusion about what to ship, what orders needed production, what current orders were on the floor, the status of each, what orders required raw materials or subcontract purchases, these kind of things. So the Invisible Factory aims to help him or her not to have to change shirts so often. One of the goals is to allow manufacturing firm owners and executives basically revert back to what made them successful in the first place. That is, identify market opportunities, engineer solutions, and develop business. The Invisible Factory accomplishes this by surrounding executives, management, and staff with complementary skills so that day-to-day running of the plant becomes invisible to ownership. So it's not the data that's invisible, just the day-to-day operations. So, how would you improve visibility? Well, the first thing you need is information. Now, in the next 4 screens, I'm going to show you screen captures of Industrios and PlantGauge, just to give you a feel for the kind of information that ERP systems capture today and how they might display that information. Keep in mind that the intent here is not to show that Industrios and PlantGauge are superior to the competition. We think they are, but it's not the point of this discussion. The intent here is rather to show that most ERP systems today gather a lot of information and present it graphically. So for example, this screen shows the welcome screen in Industrios and illustrates gadgets that can be published in HTML. So there's a workflow gadget at the top, this particular one illustrating the process that supports inventory valuation. Then below this, there's an inventory valuation change calendar illustrated here by product category. So on this screen, you've got metrics. They're published on a calendar, all supported by a workflow. This second graph or image shows 2 types of visualizations. One is a metric box. So the gray and the red boxes on the top left-hand side are called, or we refer to them as metric boxes. One on the left is in red. It's also got an ambulance in it, indicating the need for attention. The other visualization here is a graph that shows jobs by completion, status by product category, and the size of the circle here illustrates the size of the job. Now, clicking on one of these, so if I click, for example, on the late jobs, This would take you inside of Industrios to screens where you can take actions on the list of transactions requiring assistance. We feel at Industrios that actionability can be a very convenient piece of functionality to have in a manufacturing intelligence tool. This last screen illustrates the plant gauge theater mode. So theater mode allows to publish KPIs on large screen monitors installed on shop floors, and the KPIs or key performance indicators and graphs may be running in slideshow mode to keep employees focused and informed on how we're doing against those KPIs and again against or how the actuals are doing against thresholds or targets, I should say. Okay, so we had a quick view of the possibilities. Of course, you can do a lot more than inventory valuations or job status graphs and workflows, and of course, product demos can be arranged. But again, the scope of this discussion is much more about how much information an ERP can measure. We can all see from what was presented that there are, in a manufacturing environment, many aspects of an operation whose efficiency can be measured. So you could have every stop, start, resume, pause of every machine, temperature, consumption of supplies down to every nail if you want, location of material down to the bin serial, lot number, throughput, on-time deliveries, and I'm only scratching the surface. The possibilities are they're endless when it comes to ERP systems, and in the end, what you end up with is big data. The key is, how do you turn big data into big information? Are all KPIs valid? Should you be measuring everything just because you can? If not, how would you select which KPIs to measure? We at Industrios feel you should focus on KPIs that support your business objectives. And here I'm going to just kind of share a story with you of a couple of lessons that I learned reading this book a few years back. In this book called The Great Game of Business, the author tells the story of a CEO in the 80s who told his executive team to focus on improving customer service, even though his bonus was based on return on net assets, or RONA. And of course, as a result of this, management started investing in inventory to make sure that there were enough spare parts on hand to handle customer requests promptly. Of course, this had the natural effect of increasing inventory on hand, which completely destroyed RONA. And it basically took a few quarters to find out. When the information came out, the story goes on to say, the president put a complete stop on all spare part purchases. So everybody's probably heard of these stories of, quote unquote, the buying freeze, in an attempt to bring inventory levels down. And of course, the result was pandemonium, loss of customers, layoffs. And so it wasn't a pretty picture. Why would the president say this? Was he trying to conceal his personal agenda from everyone? Did he wrongfully assume that excellent customer service would be sure to drive RONA higher? The story doesn't tell. Also, why did it take 6 months for this information to come out? What I did draw from that particular section of the book is the following stories. Number one, state your business objectives with clarity. A better approach by the CEO would have been to come forward and have honesty about his intentions. There's nothing like clarity when it comes to communicating objectives. Then measure KPIs that support those objectives. Measuring everything is like trying to boil the ocean. In this example, instead of measuring everything, you could pick KPIs that, again, would support your objectives. So you could say, you could have one to measure customer satisfaction. Again, for example, so one of our business partners uses a key performance indicator called the NPS, or Net Promoter Score. Even an on-time delivery ratio in this particular case on spare parts would have been or could have been a good ratio to measure. Just as importantly, you might have wanted to measure RONA regularly in conjunction with a Net Promoter Score or on-time delivery. The final lesson in this case, publish it. Publishing your results does a few things. One, it reinforces the message that the KPIs you're measuring are important. And number two, it keeps everyone engaged and focused on trying to reach your targets, quotas, or thresholds. Okay, so we're capturing all this information. We have it all. We have an ERP system. We're publishing KPIs. Now what do you do? We've all heard the expression, you can't manage what you don't measure. My preferred way of stating that expression is manage what you measure. So first of all, what I'm trying to get at here is, how would you interpret results? Is $1 million of WIP good or bad? Is it even accurate? Is it reliable? What should you do when KPIs don't compute or miss targets? Is this an area of improvement? Where do you start? Are your business processes mapped to your operation well enough to support the gathering of this information? Is your staff sufficiently trained to execute data capture under current procedures? Is your management team well equipped to ensure the compliance? And if corrective measures are to be implemented, are you properly staffed to design and implement these changes? And if not, is there room here for coaching or mentoring? Managing with too much information can be as daunting as managing with too little. My experience, and I've had the privilege of visiting many manufacturing firms over the years, plant personnel are always extremely valuable to their firm. They understand the business, they understand the processes, the market, the vendors, the work centers, the customers, the needs, the requirements. They're irreplaceable. But again, managing with too much information, just because you have all this knowledge doesn't make you an expert in managing with information. So, knowing this, how would you improve the trust that you have in your team? Should you get an all-star? We think not. First of all, not everyone can afford a Kevin Durant. Finding, attracting, and retaining people. And, if you ask manufacturing business leaders across North America, you'll hear that that's one of the biggest challenges, is finding and attracting and retaining good people. And this is especially true of resource-challenged manufacturing firms. Besides, how much impact can a pun not intended, a superstar have? Manufacturing, at the end of the day, is a team sport. the whole operation needs to function more efficiently through the use of a business system, not just one individual. And of course, replacing all of your staff with many years of experience is again, unthinkable. Is there a better way? We think there is. Many business leaders, and I'm displaying here a quote from the co-chairman of Lowe's Corporation. Literally, I Googled this and I could have used one of a million quotes that are out there about this particular topic. Many business leaders, successful business leaders, attribute their success to the fact that they surround themselves with good people. This is nothing new. Your people are your greatest asset. Complement them with people who can help them grow with the adoption of a business system. Where can you find the right people to help with all this? We think it's time ERP vendors did more. Too many ERP vendors are focused on beating the street and just adding customers. And of course, downplaying the effort necessary to implement can make it easier to sell software, but at what cost? How many companies out there, after go live, can claim to make their system sing? ERP vendors have a lot of knowledge about how their system can be used, not just to map a particular business process, but also how to adapt and react to changing business conditions. Making use of this expertise as part of a continuous improvement program can improve visibility, agility, and creativity in devising business process solutions. Continuous training can greatly foster sustainable, with the emphasis on sustainable behavioral change. Consider the following. So there was a study by the American Psychological Association, and this study revealed the following. First of all, standalone training is the least effective method of retention. So I'm going to repeat this for emphasis. Standalone training is the least effective method of retention. Standalone, according to the study, is at best likely to produce only short-term changes in behavior. Trainees who attend annual training events, quote unquote, are likely to quickly revert back to their old behaviors. In a manufacturing environment, we call this spreadsheets. By subjecting your very good people to bare minimum training, are you putting too much strain on your very good people? The study goes on to highlight a technique called repeated retrieval, which yields better results. So repeated retrieval basically consists of asking questions to get an individual to just recall information. When compared with studying only, retrieval practice is proving to be a much better method of ingraining content into memory. The study goes on to talk about another technique called spaced repetition. And spaced repetition, as you might deduct, consists of repeated training sessions at regular intervals over periods of time. So it's the same training after a few months of use. You get different questions, more context sensitive from the trainee community. That's how you achieve progressive improvement. Now, the study finishes by concluding that if you combine those two techniques, spaced repetition and retrieval practices, this creates an environment that's optimal for retention and permanent behavioral change, up to 80 times more retention over time. That right here is one of the reasons why we created the Invisible Factory program. So enough table setting. What I'm going to do here is walk you through what the Invisible Factory consists of. So there are 4 areas of influence in the Invisible Factory. The first of these is software. You're going to need an ERP system that's suited for your industry, that's robust, reliable, secure, accessible, actionable. And you're going to need a dashboard mechanism, much like the one that we displayed earlier, the screens where we showed the plant gauge manufacturing intelligence dashboard. So that's for starters. Then you have services. And in this area of influence, the Invisible Factory has 4 facets of services. The first of these is training. Now, many software vendors only concerned with getting a sale will stop here. They'll quote bare minimum training just to get the customer ad. From the Invisible Factory, you can get 3 other types of services. The next of these is consulting. This can take the form of business process mapping, written work instructions. Recently, we helped an industrials customer pass a government contract award audit. In their manufacturing sector, this was mission critical. They didn't feel they had the internal expertise to handle this audit on their own. And really what they chose to do is stack the odds in their favor. Why not engage your ERP vendor to help deal with auditor questions about business process? Then there's advisory services. I asked a question earlier, is $1 million of WIP good or bad? Under Invisible Factory Advisory Services, you can get an independent opinion on financial statements and KPIs. Why not engage your ERP vendor, if only to help gauge accuracy and completeness? And on top of that, if targets aren't met, you can obtain from an advisory agent suggested actions based on industry best practices that management could undertake to help address a situation. The 4th type of services that you can prevail yourself of under the Invisible Factory are mentoring and coaching services. You know, some manufacturing functions are quite complex, and becoming an expert with tools like MRP calculations, planning and scheduling doesn't happen overnight. Your people will be faced with changing conditions, equipment breakdowns, staff turnover, lack of material availability, increased customer demands. It is very difficult to simulate all these in a regular training session. With an Invisible Factory agent who can attend production planning meetings, for example, to help your production manager get the most out of the tools that are available to him or her to react to these changing conditions. What about tasks that are performed a few times per year, like inventory counts, year-end procedures? An Invisible Factory agent can help guide you through the unfamiliarity of certain tasks. Invisible Factory also has a managed IT component, and this is an area of major headache for many resource-challenged manufacturers. In system admin, why not have your system administered by the people who wrote the system you need to administer? Invisible Factory also has a sub-program called PlantUp, a managed IT service to help companies plan for, test, train on, and install software upgrades. Finally, Invisible Factory offers a managed HR component. So with the implementation of any ERP system, and again, not just industrials, any ERP system that you implement, some employees' roles might need to change. And I'm just going to name a few of the functions: order entry, estimating, purchasing. They can all become less time consuming. Maybe some people have more time to analyze information. Invisible factory agents can help you rewrite job descriptions or refine your org charts. And when turnover occurs, we've even helped customers identify potential candidates for replacement. The keys here are in continuity and continuous compounded improvement. The invisible factory services, can be deployed at all levels of your organization: executive level, management, and staff. So it's at the executive level to help interpret KPIs or financial statements. At the management level, could be participation or periodic participation in production meetings, purchasing meetings, planning, etc., or even helping devise and implement changes to adapt to changes in condition. Finally, at the staff level, Invisible Factory can help with year ends, audits, peak period staffing. So with the Invisible Factory, you can build your own continuous improvement plan to achieve excellence. Why achieve excellence? Well, I am going to choose to answer that question by running a couple of short videos. One is 30 seconds in length, the other one about a minute and 20 seconds. After that, I'll come back with a couple of closing comments, and then we'll open it up for Q&A. So I think you can probably guess where I'm headed with this. You know, at the end of the day, minimal investment in an ERP system with basic training can yield one level of performance. And by the way, you can get that from Industrios as well. This will yield the industry standard result. You'll be able to park the car, hopefully better than Austin Powers. On the other hand, if you want to achieve excellence, why not surround yourself and your team with the Invisible Factory team of experts to help you deal with adoption, changing conditions, peak performance, and growth? That's all the information I have. I'm thankful for your attention. We'll now open it up for questions.
Thank you, Jacques, for that interesting perspective on the Invisible Factory. It's certainly a fresh take on traditional approaches to manufacturing software and integration. So we do have a few minutes now for questions. If you do have a question for Jacques, please feel free to type it in your GoToWebinar console, and we will aim to get to all of your questions. Be assured that if we don't have time for your question today, Jacques will follow up with you directly to provide the information. So question, Jacques, in the queue, is Invisible Factory services, or are I should say, applicable only to companies using Industrios?
Well, okay, so that's a good question and a very interesting one for us at Industrios. So the answer right now is yes, it's only applicable to companies using Industrios for now. We've toyed with the idea of opening it up to other systems. It's not beyond the realm of possibilities that this could be something that we roll out in the future. But right now, it's an Industrios-specific program.
Okay, thank you, Jacques. Next question. Do Invisible Factory services need to be booked ahead of time?
Okay, so the answer to that would be yes. I mean, you know, you can always attempt last-minute bookings And in some cases, we can accommodate. But of course, we're a services-oriented business. And, the services calendar gets quite busy. So there's nothing like getting into an engagement that we can schedule, contracted engagements ahead of time rather than reacting. So I guess the question is, you can always try and we always get situations where customers were not in a position to plan for the need for Invisible Factory services and have called upon us, with less lead time that might have been ideal. But we certainly encourage folks to try to plan as much as possible and put this into their continuous improvement program.
Okay, thanks, Jacques. So here's an interesting question. We already have trusted advisors to help interpret financial data. Does Invisible Factory want to replace them?
Okay, well, that's an easy one to answer, and the answer is no. The last thing we want to do is replace anybody from anyone's trusted advisor panel. On the contrary, we, again, and I throughout the presentation, we spent quite a bit of time describing the fact that that manufacturing firms have very good people, including full-time employees as well as trusted advisors, and these people have a certain skill set, and we feel that our skill set just complements whatever you have at your end of things. So I want to make sure we're clear. We're not there to replace anyone. We're basically there to complement.
Okay, Jacques, and here's a question from an audience member who's not seemingly that familiar with Industrios. How long has Industrios been around, and do you have support in Western Canada? But I think it would be helpful if you just speak to your capabilities across Canada.
Yeah. So that's a good question. Industrios as a company was formed in 1989. So we've been around for 25 years. Industrios as an application, the first release of it was in 1995. So we've been around for quite some time. There are over 400 customers across North America. We do have a few stragglers overseas. Just as a result of growth where, Industrios customers have been purchased by global companies and have chosen, instead of replacing Industrios, chosen to replicate the success that these subsidiaries were having into overseas organizations. So hopefully I'm answering the question. So basically, North American presence, about 400 customers, and yes, the west coast of Canada, of course, is an area where we're quite active.
Okay, thank you, Jacques. And just being mindful of time, we are coming up to the end of the webinar and would like to get everybody back into their day. So please be assured that Jacques will follow up with you to answer any questions that we didn't get to. And you should also look out for some communication from Industrios, as Jacques will be sending out a link to the recorded version of the webinar so that you might view his slide deck and just revisit parts of the webinar that are of most interest to you. So I would now like to thank Jacques for that wonderful presentation, and I would like to thank you all for attending, and more follow-up will be sent out to you shortly. And thank you again, everyone, and have a wonderful day.